Hey, folks, this is the College Countdown with Josh Neighbors. I am your host, Josh Neighbors, here on the Rogue Media Networks. This is a new channel, new show for me. At first, I want to start off by saying, if you don't know who I am, my name is Josh Neighbors. Number one job is I'm a radio producer in Little Rock, Arkansas at 103.7 The Buzz. Morning Mayhem is the show. Also, in addition to that, I've been a podcast host for a while. I used to be the Locked On Big 12 host. Then it was over at 365 Sports with the Big 12 Watch. And now I'm here at Rogue Media with the College Countdown. So a couple things. I want to thank the folks over at 365 for all their support. I'll still be in touch with them, giving me an opportunity after some unfortunate career events happened to me. If you all want to read up on that, you can just Google my name, Josh Neighbors. If you Google Josh Neighbors, Bob Huggins, see what happened there. Stand by what I did, my actions in that instance. But that's in the past now. So I want to thank the folks at 365 Sports for giving me an opportunity to host over there. Reason why we're going with Rogue Media now is because kind of expanding beyond the Big 12. These games happen every single week, and I'm really fascinated by kind of the stories they tell and the things that these games mean beyond just Big 12 games. We're not just going to be talking on this channel about, hey, this team beat that team. What does it mean for the CFP? This will be a little bit of that, but also a whole lot of big picture stuff. I want to think about, I think two topics today on our show are going to be Ole Miss, their rival against Georgia, Lane Kiffin getting over the hump, the portal, and how talent identification at the college level now is just important as the high school level for these coaching staffs, evidenced by what Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have built there on defense. And also, how applicable is that and how many teams is it applicable for? Also, we're going to talk about Colorado on this show. Is it Shedeur making Dion look good? Is it a collection of things? Is the team improving? Is he going to stay there? Colorado, if the season ended today, would be in the Big 12 championship game against BYU, playing for a spot in the CFP. How real is what the Buffs are doing this season? Things like that I want to talk about and kind of get those big picture things. We'll have picks each week. We'll have best bets. We'll have guests. We'll have all of that. We'll cover conference realignment. We'll even do some basketball when that rolls around. But kind of those big picture things, because right now we're in an era in college sports where there are so many big picture changes. We just went to a playoff in the last decade or so. We're about to go to, we're tripling the field now this season in the college football playoff. NIL obviously is there. Employment for these players is just around the corner in most folks' opinions. There's a lot to get. Conferences are changing like crazy. There's so much to get to big picture in college sports that sometimes, I think that we don't always connect the dots. And I think connecting the dots is what this show is going to be really about. And so I hope you all enjoy. I hope you all follow along. Put this ticker up now. I have a question of the day. Also, you guys can follow us on Twitter at CCPodcastJN. So I want to thank Brian Etheridge, all the folks at 365 Sports for supporting me. And also want to thank Corey and Mike and all the team here at Rogue Media for the opportunity. Glad to be joining the family. We'll have more information about where the podcast feed's going to be. But right now, YouTube, please, please, please subscribe to the channel and also like the videos and engage with us. I want this to be your show as much as it is mine. Sometimes I can do an entire show based off of one YouTube comment from a listener. So give us those comments. Give us your thoughts. I want that feedback. It makes the show more fun. So without further ado, let's do it. Let's talk about it. This weekend, the big result of the weekend was Ole Miss 28, Georgia 10. So Ole Miss has had this circuitous route now to kind of, they're peaking at the right time, but this circuitous route to where they are right now. Obviously, the Kentucky loss rather was very difficult. And I actually think they got outplayed in that game. They outplayed LSU for most of that game. I watched that game. I was on LSU. I got lucky in the end there, but I thought they outplayed them for most of that game. Their offense has not been the offense that we've come to expect, but it's been their defense that has been the big difference for them this year. And you look at a lot of these results, even their first three of the year, Furman, MTSU, and Wake, they allowed a total of 9 points in 3 games. You're going to go Georgia Southern next. They end up allowing 22 points in the first 4. Kentucky only scored 20 points in that game. They ended up winning. And also LSU only scored 29 in overtime in the game that they won. I mean, the most points scored against them this year was 31 by Arkansas. And Ole Miss scored 63 in that game, more than doubling Arkansas's output. And, I think most of the points Arkansas scored in that game, as somebody who covers the Hogs for a living, those points came in garbage time. And this defense, Ole Miss has looked hot, but it's because their defense. They in the last 3 games, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Georgia, they've only scored over 30 points in one of those games. It's been the defense that's carried them. And I think back to that game last year they had, 2023 Ole Miss, going up against LSU, right? And that game ends up being a wild shootout, 55-49. And then their big loss of the year was 52-17 against Georgia. They just could not get meaningful pressure. So what do they do in the portal? They go out and they get Princely from Princely U, we'll call him, because I can't do the last name, sadly. From Florida, they end up getting Walter Nolan. They end up getting Chris Paul from Arkansas, which was, in my opinion, a huge pickup for them. I think that's the perfect kind of linebacker to have covering space. This is a team that, yes, we know about the portal king and whatnot, but the one thing about them is that they've identified really good players in the portal, and the investment has been there. And I think that's the big takeaway for Ole Miss, is that the investment shows that your program can go from wherever you were to somewhere important because of donor investment. Doesn't mean every family in every state has to give a ton of money to the program, but if you're willing to spend the cash, you're there. Think about it like this, right? Lane Kiffin, Florida has been a thing that's been bounced around and talked about. Well, Ole Miss knows if they want to keep Lane Kiffin, they have to invest in Lane and invest in the players to make sure they can get guys that can compete at the highest level and also that make Lane Kiffin want to stay, if you can get those top players. And so that's what I love about this season especially, and I think NIL has really helped with this. The talent is much more spread out across college football, I think, than it was before. There's a lot of really good teams this year. I don't know if there's necessarily a great team. I would say Oregon's played like a great team. I think they are, probably borderline great team. Texas at times has, but they lost a game at home to Georgia. They got pushed around up front. And then also, they picked off Carson Beck 3 times in that game and still lost the contest. But still, I think Texas on the borderline. Ohio State's got a great roster. I don't know if they've hit the top gear just yet. But the portal has allowed them to, Ole Miss, to keep a coach in Lane Kiffin, I think, for a while now, because they're investing in the roster as well. And how far this can spread, I don't know. I don't know how far you can take it. What teams could get certain talent, but man, football's not forever. And so a lot of these kids, if they're smart, will take as much money / good situation to go somewhere. And Ole Miss has taken full advantage of that. And they have the advantage from X's and O's standpoint because of this NIL, because of how they've gotten these guys out of the portal to get players that allow them to only rush 4 or 5 guys sometimes and still get to the quarterback. The last 3 games for them have been absolutely absurd when it comes to a pass rushing standpoint. Against Oklahoma, they're able to get after it. No, it's not a great line, but they made them look like a bad offensive line with the way they got after the quarterback. 10 sacks in that game for Ole Miss, 15 tackles for loss. Then you go to the Arkansas game, they had 3 sacks in the first quarter, I think, against the Hogs. And then you go back this week, they were all over Carson Beck, who is a wobbly quarterback right now in terms of his confidence level, and they got after him, 5 sacks in that game. So the output from their defensive line has been fantastic, and they were able to absorb a situation where Jackson Dart goes down early on in the game. They were still able to get after still able to manufacture some offense. And then their defense the defense was the star of the game. And for Lane Kiffin, a coach that we've knocked about not being able to win the big game, finally gets his first big win. Thought it was a great job from their coaching staff all the way around in terms of managing that game. And their offense, once again, not spectacular. So you're able to see what they're able to produce because of the roster that they have built. Kind of push came to shove with how good that defensive line is across the board. They start, I believe, 10 transfers on the defensive side of the football. They've done a good job evaluating those guys. And, when that comes to that stop rate that Max Olson over at ESPN has, they're 10th in the country in stop rate. They're allowing, I think it's 1.91 points per possession. And that Arkansas game does inflate that just a little bit, but those weren't meaningful points scored against them. Some of them were in garbage time. It helped them net their first, the highest AP win in history against number 3 at home. And so Ole Miss is beginning to build something. Are they the best team in the SEC? Well, I think Texas might still have a claim to that spot right now. Tennessee is right there too because of the defense they've built. They're the only team in the country that's allowing less than 1 point per drive against their opponent. But man, has this Ole Miss team been impressive? And I think Lane Kiffin and the staff deserve a lot of credit, obviously, for the team that they have assembled. Are they a national championship contender? I mean, if their defense plays like that, it's going to be hard to beat them. It's really hard to beat a team that's going to be able to stop guys and get after the quarterback like that. That's why, I think Greg McElroy made this point during the game. Look, this is why pass rushers get paid the big bucks. That sack that Princely had at the end of the game, the strip sack, just to kind of close things out on a day where they got after the quarterback, highlighted really what they did and what they did well, and led to that premature field storming with 16 seconds left to go in the game. And how many programs can do it? Can a Colorado, who we're going to talk about, do it? I don't know, but you're seeing that right there. And, it's a point that on my radio show that I work on, Justin Moore, the country singer, 13 number 1 hits, shout out JM, made is he's frustrated because he says, man, LSU used to be a doormat. Well, they're not anymore because they can afford a great coach. And also they can afford really good players at this point in time. And so if you do that, you're going to be able to get good coaches and keep good coaches. And, there's a lot of programs out there that can't do that at this level, but there's more programs than before. It felt like we were at a point where, hey, beforehand, there's only a certain amount of programs that can win a title every year. But Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio is a example of this. And there are still teams on that blue chip ratio, like a Penn State, that break that model. There have been teams outside of that blue chip ratio, like a Clemson a few years ago. I think they might have broken it. I forgot which team it was when they won the championship, Deshaun Watson's last year. And TCU made a championship game too. They were certainly not a blue chip ratio team. But that typically holds serve. Talent now, though, is more spread across the board. And once talent gets there, you do have to coach them up pretty well. I think my Elko at A&M is a really good example that their offense is not excellent, but they're able to coach them up. But those teams are still vulnerable. It's starting to feel more like the NFL in college, but I mean that in a good way. It's exciting to see a place and time where South Carolina is able to beat A&M by as much as they did because they had a good night. Arkansas beats a Tennessee, who's right now slated to play in the SEC championship game. We're heading towards this is a good era. This is competitive. This is fun. I like this about college football right now. And I think Ole Miss is taking full advantage. They are the example for a lot of rich folks out there. If you want to invest in your team, invest in your program, you can do it right now. You can make something happen with your team, with your roster. And right now, once again, 4-2 in the league. They're in 5th place, technically tied for 5th with Alabama, with 2 losses. Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, LSU, all 2-loss teams. But Ole Miss feels like they're a bit better. Maybe Alabama on the right day is better than them. But Ole Miss feels like a team right now on the rise. They're peaking at the right time. And so Georgia's not out of playoff contention just yet, but they're right there. And so I think Ole Miss is a great example of what's possible with the portal. You can take your program from, as Justin Moore once said, doormat. And don't know if doormat's totally fair. We saw what Hugh Freeze was able to do with what then were illegal tactics to build a roster. But it feels good to see it manifest itself on a week-by-week basis. But also it feels good to see it manifest itself with the Kentucky beating them aspect of it, which feels very NFL, right? The Browns can start at Jameis Winston and beat the Ravens, who have been kind of a hammer for the last, month and a half or so. This is good in my opinion. If you disagree, let me know in the comment section. And also let us know what you all think about the question of the day. If the season ended today, is Ole Miss a playoff team? Do you think they should be a playoff team at this point in time? Leave us your thoughts in the comment section. And this kind of leads us now to number 2 team. Speaking of the playoff, Colorado, who else I wanted to get to today. So the Buffs at this juncture, if the season ended today, would be playing for a playoff spot after they get the big win this weekend on the road against Texas Tech. Going there as a 4.5-point favorite. They make it happen. And I want to talk about what Shedeur Sanders has been doing this year. So when the season started, I made a lot of comments about Colorado and when they built that roster. And I said I'd be shocked if Colorado plays for a Big 12 championship. Well, they are in position to do just that right now. If the season ended today, they would be right there playing for a Big 12 championship game. And they'd be in the Big 12 championship game, excuse me. And it's because of the roster that they have built. They're in sole possession of second place. They're 7-2 right now. And the rest of their schedule, they have got teams that I think, in my opinion, they play Utah this week on Fox at home. They're at KU, and they've got Oklahoma State at home. A really good chance to have a 10-win season, a really good chance to have 11-win season, and a good chance to go to the college football playoff. In my opinion, they have the best player in college football, Travis Hunter. I believe it's pretty hard to argue that he's not from a talent standpoint, just what he does both ways. There's not many players who are just that talented. But Shedeur Sanders has been phenomenal this year. I didn't have him ranked as the best quarterback in the Big 12 before the year. There's no doubt he has been the best quarterback in the Big 12 this season. And, I kind of raised this question with Colorado. Is Deion Sanders like Kevin Sumlin getting carried by Mike Evans and Johnny Manziel? And is it Shedeur doing the carrying? Is it a combination of both of those things? I don't know. That's the exciting part, right? We get to find out if this is the case, I think, once they go up against better competition or once, Deion moves on, whatever. But Colorado now has built something that the defense has improved week by week, and they've got a quarterback and a wide receiving core that gives them chances because their offensive line is good in pass protection. But Shedeur has been so good. He has been so accurate as a passer this season. And the numbers are not the gaudiest numbers that you'll see. 24 touchdowns, 6 picks. He's got a QBR of 74.9, which is 23rd best. But I'll tell you what, man, I know it's a weak quarterback class, but if you were an NFL GM and I asked you which college quarterback today, the most that you would want based off what you saw this season, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed not to say Shedeur Sanders. I would say he reminds me of Jared Goff. I really see that in him. He kind of has that, the accuracy is kind of what makes me think that, watch and believe that that's what he is. And maybe he throws a better deep ball than Jared Goff if you want to go that direction. But he has been so good. He's such a patient player as well. He's been sacked, I think, 28 times this year. And some of that stuff is run plays, whatever. He's not a particularly good rusher of the football. He's got 4 ground touchdowns this year to put his total up to 28. But to me, watching him, when I see him play, you see that composure, you see that poise, you see that knowledge of where his playmakers are going to be on certain plays. The Nebraska game, to me, earlier in the year was an aberration. Maybe not an aberration, but Nebraska pushed them around up front. Shedeur's quality, the way he sees the field, the way he's able to execute, and the players they have around him from an offensive, receiving standpoint, especially, have made this possible. The receiving core, plus the guys they've brought in the backfield, the running game has been good enough. And this is a team, no doubt in my mind, that's getting better as we go along. So let me know in this chat, folks. Is it a Shedeur thing? Is it a combination of things? If you want to give a percentage, I'm more leaning towards Shedeur because I'm not sure if the next quarterback is going to see the field quite like him. Once again, 2 losses for them this year, 31-28 at home in a shootout type-ish game. Where Shedeur threw for 388. And then obviously the Nebraska loss on the road, which does look worse and worse. And yes, their wins are not great. They beat North Dakota State. They beat Colorado State, Baylor, UCF, at Arizona, Cincinnati, and at Texas Tech. So, a couple bold teams they've beat. But from where they're coming from to where they are now, Deion Sanders has brought some of that talent. So you've got Lane Kiffin, who we mentioned on the earlier side of this show, bringing in players, bringing in talent, succeeding because of that talent that they have brought in. Totally fair, right? I think it's a totally fair thing to say is that, hey, yeah, the talent level being raised has gotten them to where they are. Colorado is going from a lower point, right? 4-8 season. And yes, are they beating a lot of good teams? No, it's not really the case. But are they beating good teams that last year I don't think they would have themselves in position to beat a bad team that made a couple of really terrible mistakes late in the game? So I think because of his play, because of how he's gotten better, because of how the entire team as a whole, the roster has gotten better, they're showing that steady improvement. They're a Big 12 championship contender, which makes them a college football playoff contender. Yes, are they one of the best 15, 12, 15 teams in the country? I don't know, but they've got a few guys that are huge difference makers in a game and a couple game breakers. And so if those game breakers can play well enough for them on offense, they've got a shot. Defensively, I don't know if they're there. But I think Shedeur Sanders deserves credit. And it's weird to say this. I don't really watch the national shows, as much, but I don't know if Shedeur Sanders is getting the credit that he deserves. And if you're going to do the Heisman thing, if you're going to say the Heisman is a most valuable player award, and I always joke about, hey, what do you think is value? Like, if you're to ask me who the most valuable player in college football is right now, I would say that Cam Ward to me is number one. For what they've accomplished this year, Cam Ward is just so integral to what they do. And it's such an important necessity that, for what him succeeding the way he has. But Shedeur is not too far behind in terms of output and what that output has meant for his team. And so because of that, I definitely think if I'm thinking Heisman, he's got to be up there. I know some people will say Travis Hunter, and I'm not saying it's undeserved, but I do think that because of what Shedeur has done and because of the way that he has played, I do think he deserves some Heisman consideration. If they end up being a 10-2 football team, it's going to be because of him. And so let's see what he does these last few games. But I think I'd like to see him get the invite. And get the invite there. I'd say Dylan Gabriel definitely deserves to be there right now. Jalen Milroe has come on in a big-time way. Ashton Jeanty should be there as well. But if you're going to kind of that next level about, hey, who deserves a consideration, who deserves a nod, talking about value, and it's become a quarterback award, as we say. But I definitely think Shedeur Sanders deserves some of that consideration. Let me know what you all think about that as well. If you had to pick a guy off the Colorado team, to be a Heisman candidate, would you go Shedeur or would you go Travis Hunter? I think that conversation is one that we should be having as well. We'll have those conversations on this show, The College Countdown, at CC Podcast JN. If you all want to follow the show, I'm at Josh Neighbors _ on Twitter. Please like and subscribe to videos. Leave your comments as well. We will definitely be interacting with those. We'll do some live shows, but this will be a 3-day-a-week type deal. We're going to put out content as well on the off days. Let me know what you all think about Ole Miss. Let me know what you all think about Colorado. And on Wednesday, we'll come back and talk about kind of some midweek stuff, whatever news we're getting, because it's about to be the hot seat season. And also, we'll have a fun conversation, in my opinion, about what's going on with some of these other schools, in the college football playoff rankings as well. Once again, at Josh Neighbors _ on Twitter. You guys can find the show at CC Podcast JN. Like the video, sub to the channel. Thank you, folks, for watching. We'll keep it rolling.